Gylfaginning, sections 1-10. Here begins the beguiling of Gylfi. 1. King Gylfi ruled the land that men now call Sweden. It is told of him that he gave to a wandering woman, in return for her merry making, a plough land in his realm, as much as 4 oxen might turn up in a day and a night. But this woman was of the kin of the ^sir; she was named Gefjun. She took from the north, out of Jotunheim, 4 oxen which were the sons of a certain giant and herself, and set them before the plough. And the plough cut so wide and so deep that it loosened up the land, and the oxen drew the land out into the sea and to the westward, and stopped in a certain sound. There Gefjun set the land, and gave it a name, calling it Selund. And from that time on, the spot whence the land had been torn up is water. It is now called the Lugar in Sweden, and bays lie in that lake, even as the headlands in Selund. Thus says Bragi, the ancient skald: Gefjun drew from Gylfi gladly the wave trove's freehold, till from the running beasts sweat reeked to Denmark's increase. The oxen bore, moreover, 8 eyes gleaming brow lights, over the field's wide booty, and 4 heads in their ploughing. 2. King Gylfi was a wise man and skilled in magic. He was much troubled that the ^sir people were so cunning that all things went according to their will. He pondered whether this might proceed from their own nature, or whether the divine powers which they worshipped might ordain such things. He set out on his way to Asgard, going secretly, and clad himself in the likeness of an old man, with which he dissembled. But the ^sir were wiser in this matter, having second sight, and they saw his journeying before ever he came, and prepared against him deceptions of the eye. When he came into the town, he saw there a hall so high that he could not easily make out the top of it. Its thatching was laid with golden shields after the fashion of a shingled roof. So also says Thjodolfr of Hvin that Valhall was thatched with shields. On their backs they let beam, sore battered with stones, Odin's hall shingles, the shrewd seafarers. In the hall doorway Gylfi saw a man juggling with lances, having 7 in the air at one time. This man asked of him his name. He called himself Gangleri, and said he had come by the paths of the Serpent, and prayed for lodging for the night, asking, "Who owns the hall?" The other replied that it was their king. "And I will attend thee to see him; then shalt thou thyself ask him concerning his name." And the man wheeled about before him into the hall, and he went after, and straightway the door closed itself on his heels. There he saw a great room and much people, some with games, some drinking, and some had weapons and were fighting. Then he looked about him, and thought unbelievable many things which he saw, and he said: "All the gateways, ere one goes out, should one scan; for 'tis uncertain where sit the unfriendly on the bench before thee." He saw 3 high seats, each above the other, and 3 men sat thereon, one on each; and he asked what might be the name of those lords. He who had conducted him in answered that the one who sat on the nethermost high seat was a king, and his name is Harr; but the next is called Jafnharr, and he who is uppermost is called Thridi. Then Harr asked the newcomer whether his errand were more than for the meat and drink which were always at his command, as for every one there in the hall of the High One. He answered that he first desired to learn whether there were any wise man there within. Harr said that he could not escape whole from thence unless he were wiser. "And stand thou forth who speirest; who answers he shall sit." 3. Gangleri began his questioning thus: "Who is foremost or oldest of all the gods?" Harr answered: "He is called in our speech Allfather, but in the elder Asgard he had 12 names. One is Allfather, the second is Lord, or Third of Hosts; the third is Nikar, or Spear Lord; the fourth is Nikudr, or Striker; the fifth is Knower of Many Things; the sixth, Fulfiller of Wishes; the seventh, Far Speaking One; the eighth, the Shaker, or he that putteth the armies to flight; the ninth, the Burner; the tenth, the Destroyer; the 11th, the Protector; the 12th, Gelding." Then asked Gangleri: "Where is this god, or what power hath he, or what hath he wrought that is a glorious deed?" Harr made answer: "He lives throughout all ages and governs all his realm, and directs all things, great and small." Then said Jafnharr: "He fashioned heaven and earth and air, and all things which are in them." Then spoke Thridi: "The greatest of all is this, that he made man and gave him the spirit, which shall live and never perish, though the flesh frame rot to mould, or burn to ashes; and all men shall live, such as are just in action, and be with himself in the place called Gimle. But evil men go to Hel, and thence down to the Misty Hel, and that is down in the ninth world." Then said Gangleri: "What did he before heaven and earth were made?" And Harr answered: "He was then with the Rime Giants." IV. Gangleri said: "What was the beginning, or how began it, or what was before it?" Harr answered: "As is told in Voluspa: Erst was the age when nothing was, nor sand nor sea, nor chilling stream waves; earth was not found, nor ether heaven, a yawning gap, but grass was none." Then said Jafnharr: "It was many ages before the earth was shaped that the Mist World was made, and midmost within it lies the well that is called Hvergelmir, from which spring the rivers called Svol, Gunnthrá, Fjorm, Fimbulthul, Slidr, and Hrid, Srilgr and Ylgr, Vid, Leiptr; Gjoll is hard by Hel gates." And Thridi said: "Yet first was the world in the southern region, which is called Muspell; it is light and hot, that region is glowing and burning, and impassable to such as are outlanders and have not their holdings there. He who sits there at the land's end to defend the land is called Surtr; he brandishes a flaming sword, and at the end of the world he shall go forth and harry and overcome all the gods, and burn all the world with fire. Thus is said in Voluspa: Surtr fails from the south with switch eating flame; on his sword shimmers the sun of the war gods; the rock crags crash, the fiends are reeling; heroes tread Hel way, heaven is cloven." V. Gangleri asked: "How were things wrought ere the races were and the tribes of men increased?" Then said Harr: "The streams called Ice Waves, those which were so long come from the fountain heads that the yeasty venom upon them had hardened like the slag that runs out of the fire. These then became ice, and when the ice halted and ceased to run, then it froze over above. But the drizzling rain that rose from the venom congealed to rime, and the rime increased, frost over frost, each over the other, even into Ginnungagap, the Yawning Void." Then spake Jafnharr: "Ginnungagap, which faced toward the northern quarter, became filled with heaviness, and masses of ice and rime, and from within drizzling rain and gusts; but the southern part of the Yawning Void was lighted by those sparks and glowing masses which flew out of Muspelheim." And Thridi said: "Just as cold arose out of Niflheim and all terrible things, so also all that looked toward Muspelheim became hot and glowing. But Ginnungagap was as mild as windless air, and when the breath of heat met the rime, so that it melted and dripped, life was quickened from the yeast drops, by the power of that which sent the heat, and became a man's form; and that man is called Ymir, but the Rime Giants call him Aurgelmir. And thence are come the races of the Rime Giants, as it says in Voluspa the Less: All the witches spring from Vitolf, all the warlocks are of Vilharm, and the spell singers spring from Swarthead; all the ogres of Ymir come." But concerning this says Vafthrudnir the giant: "Out of the ice waves issued venom drops, waxing until a giant was; thence are our kindred come all together; so it is they are savage for ever." Then said Gangleri: "How did the races grow thence, or after what fashion was it brought to pass that more men came into being? Or do ye hold him god of whom ye but now spake?" And Jafnharr answered: "By no means do we acknowledge him god; he was evil, and all his kindred; we call them Rime Giants. Now it is said that when he slept a sweat came upon him, and there grew under his left hand a man and a woman, and one of his feet begat a son with the other, and thus the races are come; these are the Rime Giants. The old Rime Giant, him we call Ymir." VI. Then said Gangleri: "Where dwelt Ymir, or wherein did he find sustenance?" Harr answered: "Straightway after the rime dripped there sprang from it the cow called Audumla; 4 streams of milk ran from her udders, and she nourished Ymir." Then answered Gangleri: "Wherewithal was the cow nourished?" And Harr made answer: "She licked the ice blocks, which were salty, and the first day that she licked the blocks there came forth from the blocks in the evening a man's hair; the second day a man's head; the third day the whole man was there. He is named Buri; he was fair of feature, great and mighty; he begat a son called Bor, who wedded the woman named Bestla, daughter of Bothorn the giant, and they had 3 sons: one was Odin, the second Vili, and the third Ve. And this is my belief, that he, Odin, with his brothers, must be ruler of heaven and earth. We hold that he must be so called; so is that man called whom we know to be mightiest and most worthy of honour, and ye do well to let him be so called." 7. Then said Gangleri: "What covenant was between them, or which was the stronger?" And Harr answered: "The sons of Bor slew Ymir the giant; lo, where he fell there gushed forth so much blood out of his wounds that with it they drowned all the race of the Rime Giants, save that one, whom giants call Bergelmir, escaped with his household. He went upon his ship,* and his wife with him, and they were safe there. And from them are come the races of the Rime Giants, as is said here: Untold ages ere earth was shapen, then was Bergelmir born. That first I recall, how the famous Wise Giant on the deck of the ship was laid down." 8. Then said Gangleri: "What was done then by Bor's sons, if thou believe that they be gods?" Harr replied: "In this matter there is no little to be said. They took Ymir, and bore him into the middle of the Yawning Void, and made of him the earth. Of his blood the sea and the waters; the land was made of his flesh, and the crags of his bones. Gravel and stones they fashioned from his teeth and his grinders, and from those bones that were broken." And Jafnharr said: "Of the blood, which ran and welled forth freely out of his wounds, they made the sea, when they had formed and made firm the earth together, and laid the sea in a ring round about her; and it may well seem a hard thing to most men to cross over it." Then said Thridi: "They took his skull also, and made of it the heaven, and set it up over the earth with 4 corners, and under each corner they set a dwarf; the names of these are East, West, North, and South. Then they took the glowing embers and sparks that burst forth and had been cast out of Muspelheim, and set them in the midst of the Yawning Void, in the heaven, both above and below, to illumine heaven and earth. They assigned places to all fires; to some in heaven; some wandered free under the heavens; nevertheless to these also they gave a place, and shaped them courses. It is said in old songs that from these the days were reckoned, and the tale of years told, as is said in Voluspa: The sun knew not where she had housing, the moon knew not what might he had, the stars knew not where stood their places; thus was it ere the earth was fashioned." Then said Gangleri: "These are great tidings which I now hear; that is a wondrous great piece of craftsmanship, and cunningly made. How was the earth contrived?" And Harr answered: "She is ring shaped without, and round about her without lieth the deep sea; and along the strand of that sea they gave lands to the races of giants for habitation. But on the inner earth they made a citadel round about the world against the hostility of the giants, and for their citadel they raised up the brows of Ymir the giant, and called that place Midgard. They took also his brain and cast it in the air, and made from it the clouds, as is here said: Of Ymir's flesh the earth was fashioned, and of his sweat the sea; crags of his bones, trees of his hair, and of his skull the sky. Then of his brows the blithe gods made Midgard for sons of men, and of his brain the bitter mooded clouds were all created." 9. Then said Gangleri: "Much indeed they had accomplished then, methinks, when earth and heaven were made, and the sun and the constellations of heaven were fixed, and division was made of days. Now whence come the men that people the world?" And Harr answered: "When the sons of Bor were walking along the sea strand, they found 2 trees, and took up the trees and shaped men of them. The first gave them spirit and life, the second wit and feeling, the third form, speech, hearing, and sight. They gave them clothing and names: the male was called Askr, and the female Embla, and of them was mankind begotten, which received a dwelling place under Midgard. Next they made for themselves in the middle of the world a city which is called Asgard; men call it Troy. There dwelt the gods and their kindred, and many tidings and tales of it have come to pass, both on earth and aloft. There is one abode called Hlidskjalf, and when Allfather sat in the high seat there, he looked out over the whole world, and saw every man's acts, and knew all things which he saw. His wife was called Frigg, daughter of Froggvin, and of their blood is come that kindred which we call the races of the ^sir, that have peopled the elder Asgard, and those kingdoms which pertain to it, and that is a divine race. For this reason must he be called Allfather, because he is father of all the gods and of men, and of all that was fulfilled of him, and of his might. The earth was his daughter and his wife; on her he begot the first son, which is Asa Thor. Strength and prowess attend him, wherewith he overcometh all living things. 10. Njorfi or Narfi is the name of a giant that dwelt in Jotunheim. He had a daughter called Night. She was swarthy and dark, as befitted her race. She was given to the man called Naglfari; their son was Audr. Afterwards she was wedded to him that was called Annar; Jord was their daughter. Note: Jord = earth. Last of all Day spring had her, and he was of the race of the ^sir. Their son was Day; he was radiant and fair after his father. Then Allfather took Night, and Day her son, and gave to them 2 horses and 2 chariots, and sent them up into the heavens to ride round about the earth every 2 half days. Night rides before with the horse named Frosty Mane, and on each morning he bedews the earth with the foam from his bit. The horse that Day has is called Sheen Mane, and he illumines all the air and the earth from his mane. End of Gylfaginning, sections 1 through 10, recording by Expatriate in Bangor, Maine.